All right, welcome in. In this video, we're going to try to do some practical reasoning with logic and sets in a kind of problem that is maybe characteristic of problems you might face in a computer science career. So for that reason, I've created a little bit of a toy problem here. I imagine that we're working for a streaming site. I've called it Notflix. We'll assume it's a new AI streamer that doesn't have real movies. They're just AI movies. So here's a bunch of AI movies that are inspired by real movies. And the Netflix platform is facing a pretty standard problem of recommender systems for these types of platforms. Of course, we know that to achieve this, these streaming sites have a lot of data gathering. They gather a lot of data about these movies, both from the internet and from their users. And it is that context in which we're going to place ourselves here today. So we're going to imagine here that what has happened is we've got 32 movies we have pre-screened or curated for the potential to be put on the welcome screen of the streaming site. However, we don't want to put too many movies up there. We don't want to swamp them. So even though we've got down to 32 movies here, I've posed the problem that maybe we're looking for 8 of these movies. So we're going to look for 8 movies from these 32. And we have some criteria. So up here in the top right, I've just put a little note for myself. Well, what is it that I'm looking for? And this is a very common kind of informal statement that we get in natural language, usually from a client or our boss or somebody else who has a demand on the software that we're going to provide. In this case, because it's informal and natural language, it's not going to have a lot of the details that we as programmers are going to want. We're going to have to reason about that and come up with those details. That's what we're going to try and work on here today. So let's look at this informal statement. It says a diverse set of the best movies of size 8. So I mentioned we're going to only pick 8 movies, but we want to find a diverse set of the best movies. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that these are constraints on the solution that we can provide. We can't just provide any 8 movies. We need to provide 8 movies that somehow are the best and somehow are also diverse. And because the terms best and diverse are subjective and informal, we are faced with the problem of formalizing these ideas somehow before we carry out our task. And that's the main thing I want to focus on here today. Now, we have some instinct, which is to go back to our instructor, if you're a student, and say, wait, tell me what you mean. What is a diverse set? What is the best set? But we are training to become the experts ourselves. We're the ones that people are going to want to come to and say, what do you mean by a best movie? What do you mean by the diverse set? And we're going to have some logical justification to do it. Now, we've been studying logic and sets. We have a little bit of formal mathematical lingo and jargon now that we can work with. And that's what I want to work with when we start thinking about our problem we're facing here. Okay, so I want us to start thinking about this. We have to come up with some characteristic of what it means to be the best. And we also have to have some kind of characteristic of what it means to be diverse. And the other thing we have is a bunch of data of different kinds that we can use to come up with some kind of criteria for what is the best or what is the diverse set. So for instance, let's start with the best. Let's just focus on what it means to be the best. And let's go through some of the data here and see which of these data might stand out to us as ones that might be relevant for being the best. So first of all, the first one I see here is user rating. That is literally users telling us if they think it's the best. So that one seems like it's probably a good one. If we have a movie that's got 5 stars from the users, then that's probably a good one. At least it's a good one to recommend to our users because it means maybe a lot of other users would like it. Okay, so standing out, maybe I'll make a little list over here as we go. So we've got user rating. What's the next one? View count. How many views there have been? Okay, that seems relevant. I'm going to put it in there as well. I'm not necessarily saying these are in any particular order. We might want to think about that later. But same thing with recent views, maybe, that how much a movie has been viewed might itself be a good metric to use to determine if it's best or not. Same thing with recent views. That might tell us maybe it was popular in the past, but not anymore. So that can tell us a little bit. There's something there. And then I do like this next one too, critic score. So maybe you've gone to Rotten Tomatoes. That's where I go sometimes to check out whether a movie is popular or not. And there's two scores. One is the critics that are sort of professionals whose job it is to watch movies and say what they think about it. And then there's just the rest of us who we don't have that as our job, but we just are movie lovers and we just say, hey, 5 stars or 1 star. So the user rating is the public, and then the critic is more this professional class. And sometimes there's contrast between those two, but I so far I've liked all these four. I'm getting a little worried, but I think some of this data won't be relevant. Let's look at the next one. Trend. Is it an uptrend or a downtrend? This might not be the most important piece of information we will use, but it is something that I think I like. Now we get to genre. Genre for me already, and I haven't really said much about that, but let's put this down here. For me, it's already sounding something about more about being diverse. Do I think the genre that a movie is going to make it the best? Well, I personally might like a comedy movie or an action movie or something like that, but my personal subjective values doesn't mean that action are always better movies than, dramas or something like that. So to try and be less subjective there, try and step back and be more objective in my reasoning, I have to think, no, actually, there are lots of different people out there that like different genres. This is more about a diversity thing. It's and what I'm saying by that is if I were to now select the 8 movies and maybe I select all action movies, that's not really a diverse set. One of the criteria I might want to consider when I'm thinking, hey, is this diverse, is do I have a number of different genres? So I'm going to move genre down here. And then we've got a couple other ones here, release year. I'm going to put this down here as a diversity thing as well. I don't think the movies released in 1999 are better than the ones in 2010. Maybe they were, but that again might be subjective, right? Likewise, country and language seem like pretty good diversity tags here. Runtime category, that one's a little unclear. So let me jump to where I've got some data here. Okay, so that was just telling me long, medium, or short. Again, and then the budget tier also blockbuster, mid, or indie. Those also seem like they might be relevant in the diversity consideration. All right, so what have I done here is I've sort of looked at the pieces of data that we have available, and I've tried to say, hey, are these things that are going to be relevant to my consideration of being the best, or are they going to be relevant to my consideration of being diverse? I'm going to take a moment and just talk about diversity for a second, because there's something important that I want to bring into our consideration, which is when we're starting to consider diversity, we often do what's called partitioning our set into subsets that are mutually disjoint. There's a lot of jargon in there, so let me try and spell some of that out for us. So if you have two sets that are disjoint, then they have an empty intersection. There is no overlap between the two sets. That's what it's mean to be disjoint. So the even numbers and the odd numbers are disjoint. But a partition also has a requirement that when we have these disjoint sets, they also cover the original set. That means all the elements in the original set show up in one or another of the disjoint sets in our partition. This is still true of the even and odd numbers, for instance. The even numbers and the odd numbers, if you put them together, you get all the numbers. We didn't leave any numbers out there. And so when we're looking here, for instance, our genre is a obvious partitioning of our movies, unless movies might have two genres. In my example, they don't. So we might have action comedies. But in my example, you're either an action or a comedy. And that means you're going to be disjoint. The action movies won't overlap with the comedy movies. However, all movies will have a genre. So when we put all the movies together, we take all the actions and we take all the comedies and all the dramas, etc., and we put them all together, we just have all the movies. There's none left out. So genre is sort of a natural partitioning of sets that we already might consider. And when we're considering diversity, when we're trying to have a diverse set, what we usually are looking for is some kind of disjoint collection of sets like genres. And then we have a criteria that says, well, we want to hit all those sets. We want one element from every genre. So when we go through here, I might consider this for genre. Do I want to have in my list of 8 movies, one action movie, one comedy, one drama, etc.? That seems like it stands out to me as being one of the things that I want. So I'm actually going to just go ahead and flag this one with a green and be like, okay, genre is one of my diversity categories that I want. Now release year. Release year, let's do the same logical exercise here with release year. Do we want one movie from every year, for instance? Now, already we can probably say that's a little bit too fine-grained. We are only picking 8 movies. There's way more than 8 years, so we're not going to be able to do that. But we might be able to do something a little bit less fine-grained, a little bit more rough-grained, which might be saying, well, maybe how about decades? Maybe we want one movie from the 2020s, one from the 2010s, one from the 2000s, the 90s, etc. as we go back. That could be more achievable. However, I think I might even recommend, that seems a little bit too fine-grained still for me, my taste. So, and maybe this is a good point to point out, there's no right answer to this, what we're doing here. So if you're like, no, actually that does sound good to me, and you want to roll with that, awesome. Your way is equally justifiable. We just want to have good, reasonable justification for why we're doing things. What I'm going to suggest here is for release here, I'm going to split these into just new versus old. And maybe I'll pick an arbitrary date of like 2020. If the movie has been since 2020 or more recently, it'll be new. And otherwise, it'll be old. So I'm going to replace this one. I'm going to call it new old. And again, maybe I'll highlight this with green just to indicate, okay, I want to use this as one of my categories. The country of origin, I think this is probably a good one. But language and country of origin probably overlap a lot. For instance, if we have a movie that's from Korea, I bet it's in Korean. Right? If it's from America, it's most likely in English. So I think I might only want to pick one of these 2 categories to include in because there's a lot of overlap between them. My instinct initially is maybe country, but then I need to remember that there are also many countries that produce movies in the same language, and maybe it's more about the language communities that I want to target than specifically the countries. And so I have to make an arbitrary decision here. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's do country or language and not do country. Then it comes down to runtime categories and budget tier. Both of these seem relevant to diversity, but both anticipating that it might be hard to try and get diversity in all of these categories, but also in the idea that I actually don't think that these diversity categories matter as much to people. I don't think there are a lot of folks that are like, oh, where are my short movie? I wanted a short movie. Or okay, indie maybe more. Like I want an indie movie over a blockbuster. Exactly. That might be okay, so maybe I've argued myself. I'm going to take a runtime category out, but I think maybe I will try to do budget. Maybe I'll just say, let's go yellow there. Just if I have the wiggle room to also try and get some diversity here, I'll do it. Okay. And for that matter, maybe country and runtime I'll consider as well if I have wiggle room. But for now, I've kind of ranked them. And maybe I want to be explicit. What I'm saying here is I want to try and get every genre. I want to try and get new movies and old movies. I want to try and get every language if I can. And I want to at least see, am I hitting, indies and blockbusters and maybe whatever else is there. That's my goal. Let's move back to considering what does it mean to be the best? Because considering what it means to be the best is a different kind of logical reasoning than we were doing for diversity. I mentioned for diversity, we're thinking about these disjoint and mutually exhaustive sets, these covering sets, and we want to say, hey, I want to get one from each group. right? But being the best isn't about that. Maybe what being the best is saying, now that we go to every genre, I kind of want to grab the best one out of each genre. Well, what counts as the best within the genre? And that's when we're going to come back to some of these other pieces of data. So maybe user rating, I want to have a high user rating, but then also critic score. Now, how do we compare amongst these? So for instance, I might say I want to have a user rating. Let's go back to our data for a second just to see how these numbers look. So user ratings are like 5 stars. Our view counts are like in the hundreds of thousands and millions. Our recent views, not so high. And the critic score, it looks like, is a percentage. So when I go back to my reasoning here, I could be saying something like, well, I want my user rating to be greater than 4. And I might want my critic score to be greater than 90, maybe. I'm picking some arbitrary thresholds here. And maybe my view count should be greater than 1,000,000. Let me say 1 mil. And then maybe I do something similar for my recent views, greater than 10,000. Something like that. So that's pretty arbitrary right there. I've left my trend off for now, and maybe I will continue to just ignore that one. And I might be able to change this a little bit and say, maybe I want to change my thresholds ever so slightly. View count 1,000,000. Now, here's the other thing that comes in is we want to think logically, how are we going to combine these together? Are we saying I only want to select movies that have user rate or greater than 3.5 and a view count greater than 1,000,000 and recent views greater than 10,000 and a critic score greater than 90? Because we put the and joiner in there, what we will be doing is we keep reducing and reducing the size of the number of movies, right? We might start out with a set of all the ones greater than 3.5, and then we have to remove from them any that don't have the view count we want, and then we remove from that any that don't have the recent views, etc. We keep getting smaller and smaller as we apply these. However, we could also use the or. We could say it has a user rating greater than this, or it has a view count greater than 1,000,000, or it has recent views that are high, or it has a high critic score, and that might be something that we want to do. I'm immediately kind of looking at this 90 thinking this is probably too high, so I'm going to go change this maybe 80, maybe. We can come back and change this later, and I'm starting to think we want an or to kind of blend these ones together more than an and. We could blend that together. We don't have to say they're all anded or they're all ored. We could say maybe we want any two of the three. That's sort of saying we want an and, or a two of the four maybe. We want an and out of two of them, but which two we're oring together. That's sort of a weird, complicated logical sentence to write down, but in our own heads, it's easy for us to understand 2 out of 4. Right? Take 2 out of 4 if you meet 2 out of 4 categories. Okay, now what I want to do, we can kind of look at our data. I've put the data in here. I've also added some color coding on our ratings for the best category, so we can start thinking about which are the best movies that we have here. One of the things I want to highlight is I didn't want to look at the data before I did my reasoning about the categories. If I looked at the data ahead of time, it might introduce bias into me. I might be like, I really like the full Monty Python. I want it to be on, so I need to figure out some way that I can manipulate my choices over here to put the full Monty on, right? We want to avoid that, right? Especially when we're considering things like diversity and best. When we're thinking of what the best thing is, our subjective biases might come in. We don't want them to come in when we're trying to be objective. Likewise, for diversity, we all have some built-in biases that we've inherited from society and culture that we need to try and take effort to overcome. And we do that by not looking at the data ahead of time when we're doing our considering. Now, only after we've come up with some plan that we believe is objective, then we can go back and review what's going to go on with the data. That's my recommendation for you if you want to avoid your bias coming into these situations as well. Okay, but now that we've come up with sort of a plan, we're thinking maybe we're going to apply our user ratings and so on. We're going to do an or. And I mentioned it at the end there. Maybe we'll do our 2 out of 4. That's a good place to start. If it hits 2 out of 4, then maybe it counts. And maybe what we should go here is go through our data and see which ones would count as good according to our logical considerations we came up with. Now, here's one thing I want to show in case you're not into spreadsheets, you haven't done a lot of spreadsheets. We can sort this data. Actually, did I grab it all? Okay, so I'm going to grab the whole table that I want here. I'm going to go and it's down under more actions, sort range, and then I can pick which column I want to sort by. I'm going to sort by user rating, which is column B. And it says A to Z, that's going to be least to highest. I want highest to lowest, so I'm going to switch it to Z to A, and I'm going to go and sort it. And now, and with my color coding, you can see it's sort of nicely color coded. We now have them ordered in order of user rating, which means if we want all the ones greater than 3.5, oh, all our movies are greater than 3.5. That's strange. That's weird. That means that this choice is not good. This in good in sense that it doesn't partition our movies at all. It hasn't done anything for us. We could throw that choice out and it wouldn't do anything. So let's change it. Let's change it to 4. That means greater than 4 maybe, or greater than equal to 4. We might include these two. We can put them. But I could say these are now a subset of the original set of movies that we have selected based on this criteria here. Okay. And we could use set builder notation, for instance, to show what that set would be. And now we could consider this with some of our other criteria as well. Let's go to the view count now. I want to again show something. I think this will work. This time I'm going to do column C in descending order. Now what it's going to do is it's going to put them in descending order, but it's also going to maintain, oh, I'm glad we have a tie here. It's going to maintain the ordering of our movies in the previous column. So our first 2 movies here are tied for view count at, what is that, 2.8 million, but one of them had a higher user rating. That one will still be rated higher. So sometimes what we're going to do is this dependent sorting. We'll sort by one category and then another and then another and another, and that might put them into an order that works for us. I don't think that's going to work for us with this particular set, because when we sorted again by our view count, we see that a lot of the high rated ones had lower view counts. And in fact, this is something that I want to highlight about our data, because when we look at view count, notice something interesting here. Our top view count movies are also all the movies that were from the United States, which is not surprising. This is sort of how real world movie data is. But this is what we will call skewing of our data. This is a case where there is some correlation between our criteria that stands out in a way. So what does this mean right now for us in terms of our selection? If we're choosing view count greater than 1 million, then we have already said only pick US movies, which counters our, well, we have country not highlighted here, but our language issue, because those are all English movies or they're all American movies, which means our diversity criteria is coming at odds with our criteria for what is the best. And I think this comes up a lot in different data sets where we should say, hey, let's flag this one now and be actually, I'm going to turn that one red and say, this is not really a great criteria to determine which are the best movies, because it is correlated in a negative way with some other demographic material. Sure, we might want to use view count, but let's leave it until the end as a tiebreaker, something like that. Let's look at something else instead. Recent views, let's see if recent views has the same kind of skewing. I bet it will. So do we still have, yeah, we still have all the US films on the top, but maybe there's a slightly different ordering of those films, maybe by their dates and so on. And that might be interesting to see. So there might be there still might be relevant things. Notice also when we sorted by recent views, how the view count, the main view still kind of looks like it's in order from the color coding here. That's showing there's a lot of correlation between these two. All right, let's go back. I'm going to sort by column B again, and then I'm going to go sort by column E to see if we have correlation between those two as well. Okay, so now I've sorted by column E after sorting by column B, and we don't see a lot of correlation here. Sure, there's a couple high rated ones that are also high rated by the critics, but There are some high-rated critic ones that are low-rated by users, and there are probably vice versa, some lower-rated ones by the users that are higher, or other way. What's vice versa? Down here somewhere. Yeah. High-rated Spider Guy, very high-rated by the users, very low-rated by the critics. Again, quite common in movies for sometimes the viewer base at large liking movies that critics didn't find very interesting. Okay, so what we've done is we've found a little bit of the lay of the land of our data. Now that we've looked at our data, we've actually found that our idea of using views might not be a super great way to do our categorizing, and maybe user rating and critic score are the best two. And for the moment, if we did all the ones that had user rating greater than 4, or the ones that had critic score greater than 80, we would have a pretty large set of movies. I'm thinking we said 2 out of 4. So maybe we want and those two, since we've kind of thrown out our views as maybe being problematic for our task at hand. So maybe we should take these two here and say both of them. And I'm going to try that again here. So let's see. Which ones are greater than 80 right now? That's everything down here to melted. These bottom ones here, I'm going to move for the moment. Those are the ones we have ruled out for the moment. Let's take the top ones. We're going to sort them by column B, and I can move those ones down too, separating off the ones that don't count. Now, how many do we have left? It looks like we have 18 here. That's not bad. We're looking for 8, but remember, we still haven't considered our diversity very much. All right. And now we have a choice of sort of picking the ones that are, we have to pick 8 out of these 18 that we are going to use, and we want to have a diverse set. So we want to go through some of our diversity considerations and make sure the set that we're choosing agrees with them. Now I'm going to do something a little bit interesting here. I'm going to make a new score. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the user rating and I want to normalize it somehow. Since it's out of 5, I'm going to multiply it by 20. That'll give it out of 100. And then I'm going to add on the critic score. What that's going to do is somehow for us combine the critic score and the user rating into a single score. And now I can sort those movies by their new score value. And this can give us an order in which we might want to consider our movie. Okay. So ideally, I could just say, let's grab the top 8. And this is how I'm going to reason about this. I'm going to grab the top 8. I'm going to look at them from a diversity standpoint now. I've kind of finished applying my best criteria here. I've gone ahead and used 2 of my criteria. I've only picked the ones that satisfy those criteria, and then I've kind of combined them together to sort them by that combined score. So I'm feeling mostly done with the best part. I might go back into these ones at the bottom in case I need. Maybe there's not a mid-budget one. I'm trying to think there's not a romance comedy or a romance movie that I need to add. Then I might come back down here and grab one. But for now, I think that the movies I want to pick are from these 18, and I'm going to do so by looking at my categories. So genre, let's look at genre. If I take the top 8, what genres do I've got? I've got a thriller, a drama, a comedy, a sci-fi, an animation, and a fantasy. We have doubled up on drama and we've doubled up on thriller, but we've missed out on horror, and we've missed out on action, and we've missed out on romance, actually. So we don't actually have room to cover. I didn't realize this ahead of time. It looks like we have 9 genres and we have 8 spots. But if we have 9 genres and 8 spots and we think genre is important, we probably don't want 2 dramas and we probably don't want 2 thrillers. So I'm going to have to pull some of those out. Which ones I pull out is not immediately clear, because I'm still trying to pick the best movies, but I'm also still trying to hit other diversity categories. So I'm going to flag, I want to pull some of those out so I can bring some in. But what about new versus old movies? Well, I've got some in the 2020s. I've got some in before that. So I think we're handling new, old pretty fine with our current selection. We don't have to worry about that very much. What about language? Korean, Japanese, German, Korean, English, Japanese, Spanish. We're missing maybe a French. Hey, we have a French romance down here. That could be valuable. Other languages we're missing. That's the only one we're missing. So the French romance movie here, Amelie 2, I think that one, it's also an indie movie. We got indies and mid-budgets and blockbusters up there. But I might replace one of my dramas or thrillers with Amelie 2. That seemed to be the only diversity thing we needed to handle, other than maybe adding the horror or an action. The horror is higher rated. So I'm going to pick that one. So let's start highlighting which movies we're going to pick. So these two are special choices. We're picking them specially because they're in the genres of horror and romance, which was not covered otherwise by the highest rated movies. Then I'm going to go and try and pick the highest rated movies one at a time. We're going to get Parasite. We're going to get Seven Samurai. Now, we're going to swap out these two. Uh-oh, one of these is German and one is Japanese. We have another Japanese movie down here. So maybe, do you see what I'm reasoning here is I'm like, okay, maybe that Seven Samurai, we have to instead include The Lives of Others too, because it's German and it covers the German side for us. And now I think I want to do all of these four. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that I want to pick. Let's just do a quick run through. We've got a thriller. Oh, no, we wanted to swap out one of our other thrillers. So this one should be replaced with Pan's Maze, which was a fantasy movie from Spain in Spanish language that we were trying to get. Okay, so we've got our first movie. It's a thriller from Korea. Our second movie is a drama movie from Germany. Then we have a comedy movie that's English from the UK. Then we have a sci-fi movie that's also English but from the US. Then we have an animation movie from Japan, a fantasy movie from Spain, a horror movie from Korea, and a romance movie from France. That's French. So I think we've now come to the point where I'm happy with what we've done. Okay, I think I've satisfied my criteria that I wanted to by selecting a diverse set of the best movies. Hopefully you've had a chance to explore logic and set theory in this sort of practical reasoning exercise. And we'll see you in that next video.